Good evening and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Season 7, Episode 16, Inter Arma Enim Silent Legis. Before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
That is correct. And as I say every single week, you should find us and follow us because we're great. We're awesome. We're a good time. And we are coming up on the end run of our show. I always get a little choked up at the thought. We're going to figure out something to do really, really quick, really, really soon to keep us going, maybe. Um, if we decide to when this is all over with. But yes, we are here to talk about an unusual episode, I will say, for Star Trek. It's something that they haven't really done in a long time, kind of this more espionage type um, episode in all of the Trek franchises, really. So we're going to talk about that and some other things, of course, that are important to this episode as we get into it. But before we do all that, we of course like to give ourselves a little bit of a weekly check-in, check-up since the last time we've seen each other. So David, how's your week been?
Week's been fine. Wasn't as busy this week at work than I was the previous week, but it was still busier than we had been with our liquidation sale going on. Um, Getting a lot of scavengers though. A lot of people being like, "Oh, I saw your side. You guys are closing. I wanted to just pop in and see what you have. When are you guys actually gonna close? What are you gonna do afterward?" Just if you want to buy something, come buy something. But I don't know. It's just a lot of scavengers. It just feels like I go to sit down and someone else walks in, which again is a good thing, but it it's not one of those they're coming in because they like always need something. It's more like they're picking over the carcass, and it just feels kind of kind of just unpleasant in that sense. But whatever. Um, I've been reading a book. It's called The Americans in Normandy. It's a follow up to The Americans on D-Day or at D-Day that I read like a month ago. So it's kind of like a parallel, like I mentioned, to the Stephen E. Ambrose books that also followed D-Day and then the American war through France. But this book in particular is just the Normandy campaign, which is northern France. So it's much more detailed about those battles that the other book kind of was a little more kind of skipped through a little bit more quickly. Um, it's interesting. It's history. It's a little bit dry at times, but this book really nails home just how brutal World War II was. I mean, obviously we know it was brutal, but like Band of Brothers is a great show, but
Yeah,
it's so great that it almost it idealizes in some ways the war experience because of just how like
I
connected these guys were. Like they were friends, they were brothers in arms, but war is brutal and this book is just kind of nailing home how just they were having to just make brutal head-on attacks into German forces that had built up these awful defenses, and it was just and Hitler, being the evil dude that he was, told his guys, "You're fighting to the last man." He refused to surrender any bit of any territory, and he just made it brutal the whole way for our guys. And that's what this book is about. It's only about the first couple months, June, July, August of the campaign after D-Day. But this book is really nailing home how rough it really was. So
I,
that's what
I will
I've been doing.
definitely I will definitely agree with that sentiment about Band of Brothers. I've watched that series many times, and there is kind of this glorified ideological status to that
Mhm.
show and to those men that went through that. That even with as graphic as Band of Brothers was, you still kind of got this sense of them being, I guess, untouchable would be the best word that I could really think about it.
I would agree with that word. Yeah.
Especially the character, or actually the real life man, Winters.
Yeah.
When he comes out of it, it's just kind of this very elevated legendary status, which I mean, arguably you could say that he earned, but at the same time, it's just like, yeah, that show just kind of it does something. It's something else. So yeah, that'd be an interesting book to read. Something that give you a bit more pull you down, get you out
Yeah.
of the clouds a little bit, put you down on the ground for sure. With
The one thing that's funny about this book, it was true of the previous book as well. The maps, for some reason, are blurry as all hell. They are terrible maps in the book. It's like they, when they were putting the book together, they're like, we need maps, obviously, but they didn't like print off a copy to see how it would come off on the page. But this is the second book. Like I can make it the first book, oh, you messed it up. Whoops. The second book, you'd think y'all would have worked it out. So I've had to go on Google Maps and like follow along on like just pull up France and like type in different places and try and figure out what they're talking about, which has actually been kind of fun because then you can work the map yourself and kind of look around. But there are times when they say a name and that name was only in existence at the time, like it was a fort, and that fort doesn't exist anymore. So you go to type it in and it doesn't really pull up anything on Google Maps. But otherwise, that was kind of a fun little side bit with this book is like, hey guys, your maps are terrible. They don't like they are literally illegible, like the words don't even print out properly on this map.
I wonder how
So
much of that is. I wonder how much of that is intentional versus a printing error, a printing mistake. Because I've heard about certain things, like when they go to like reproduce books for sale, especially through sources like, say, Amazon or Half Price Books, or if you order it through there. Sometimes they mess up the alignments and the spacing and the sizing of stuff, and you have to, kind of get them to admit they made the mistake, and then they have to fix it, of course. So I wonder if that's
well, I
something to
guess
that.
I'll say this, which is kind of it's funny and sad at the same time. In the acknowledgments, the author, thanks all these people, but he thanks his wife. Authors always thank their wife. My wife is my muse, and she inspires me, and she makes my life possible. But she also helped me with the writing of this book. And he says that his wife helped make the maps. I read that and I was like, I don't know if
Mm,
it was her fault. I'm not going to say it was her fault, but I feel bad that all this work she did apparently came to naught because I can't read a damn thing on this map.
well,
It's
hopefully
almost
it
like she
is.
did too much. Maybe that was like it was so detailed that the damn printer just couldn't handle how much she was trying to communicate. But I don't know.
Well, in that case, hopefully it is the issue with the actual printer, and when they went into production, there was some kind of it was off somehow.
I
Hate to think
that's
that all of her work that he's praising,
oh yeah.
surely she wouldn't have given him
Well,
terrible maps
I
to
will I
use.
will seriously emphasize that it's like these maps are so detailed that that might have been the problem. Because when I read Napoleon a couple of years ago, you might remember me talking about Napoleon. Those maps were so bare boned that you couldn't tell what was happening because there was like nothing really offered in whatever the
Mhm,
maps they provided. So this is, I guess, the opposite problem. There was so much that the damn printer was just. It's like it's unfocused. You know, like printers sometimes just
mhm.
don't have the right focus when they print something. Anyway, that's what I've been doing. Other than that, not a whole lot. Just kind of the usual. How about you? What's up with you?
Not much mainly. I'm still, working, of course. Been doing workouts. Still kind of got to increase that a little bit because I've been taking my niece to the gym now. She's really wanted to learn how to do certain things and to help get herself. She wants to play sports. She's getting ready to go into um, high school, so she's wanting to, shape up a bit to be, get her endurance up and everything like that to play sports and everything. So I was like, okay, well, so I've added some days that I'll go and just it's really just kind of showing her the basics of doing things. I'm not trying to like, hulk her out or anything like that, but it's more, just how to have perfect form, work on your form to do things safely, instruct on what certain equipment is, what certain machines are, how they work, how to change things, all that kind of stuff, which I feel like is knowledge that people they're never really given. You just kind of do a lot of trial and error in the gym. And I mean, there's a lot of gyms, especially these days that I've seen, they do have, you know, um, descriptions of the equipment listed on them on the sides of it. So you can like go in there and read it. But a lot of people don't want to do that. They don't want to read it because they don't want to seem like they're a novice at the gym. you know,
Mhm.
which I think is kind of funny, because you would rather risk injury and sometimes potentially, permanent or life-threatening injury than take the time to read or to ask someone to show you how to do something or whatever it is. So I remember when I was in high school and first learning how to do lifts and like that. That was one of the main things that my coaches always talked to us about was proper, safety and etiquette and form and what to use and how to use it and knowing your limits and so forth and so on.
Right.
And I was just like, yeah, I'm just going to pass that knowledge on to her because I would rather know for sure whether I'm with her or not that she knows how to do anything and everything in the gym
Right.
and then she can adjust the weight herself, but at least she'll know how to sit in the thing or to access it or how it's going to pull on her or whatever the situation may be. So that's been fun, because our main complaint after we do pretty much everything is, oh, I'm so weak, I can't do it. I'm like, yeah, I know you are weak, but it's okay. You're 13, you're 14, it's fine.
Right.
You're not supposed to know how to do it. So everybody starts somewhere. So yeah, and then like, she'll do hers and I'll take her through her whole part of her workout and then I'll do mine. And then she's like, "Well, how do you do that?" And I was like, "Well, first of all, never don't like I've been doing this for a lot longer than you and I'm much stronger than you are. So don't get mad that I do more." I said that's just silly. So we've gone through that a lot, which is pretty funny. So and then the other thing that she's had to get used to is the fact that people want to talk to me, like, because to her, I'm just her uncle, you know. But to strangers, I'm a very large man walking through any room that I'm in, and so I always get stopped. Do people want to ask questions? Do people want to talk? And all this kind of stuff. And so every day, and I mean seriously, every day that we have gone to the gym, I've been stopped a few times, and people have asked, what sport did I play, how long I've been working out, when I did this, all that kind of stuff. And she's just like, well, I don't get it. And I was like, that's because you grew up, you've grown up with me, so you don't see that I'm a large man anymore. That's just your uncle. You don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I said, but to other people who are not used to seeing me every day, like, I'm sorry, but I'm pretty impressive. That's what that was the joke that I was telling her. Yeah. And she's like, you just wanted to say that. And I was like, I mean, but it's true. Like I'm not
Hey, some
making it
people are
up.
genetically blessed. You gotta
Yeah,
just admit it. Yeah.
right. And I said, I get it. Like, you're not used to it. I said, and then again, you don't really see me doing things. You just think, if anything, you just think I'm your big uncle. Like, I get it. I said, but now you've watched me move 300 and 400 pounds easily. I'm pushing it, I'm pulling it, I'm, maneuvering, I'm doing all this stuff. And I said, have you noticed that there's no one in the gym that comes even close to the amount of weight that I'm doing, like, at all? She's like, well, I wasn't really paying attention. I was like, I know you weren't paying attention, but I'm saying, but next time, watch, like, even the person right next to us, whatever it is that they're doing versus what I'm doing, you'll see there's a massive difference. She's
Yeah.
like, well, okay. And I was like, yeah, I've been doing this for a while. So, all right. So,
Uh,
so that's been fun to watch as she kind of like sees me differently.
right.
So, but other than that, I've still been making my way through the comics, the one that has the return of
Benjamin
Captain
Sisko.
Cisco, and waiting for you to get caught up so that we can do the Cisco autobiography, which we're going to save obviously to the end of our run of this show,
Yeah.
and doing the learning the various IT programming and coding languages,
Nice.
HTML, SQL, and Python. Been working my way through those.
Cool.
Hopefully, I can finish it up soon, and then go into phase two of my plan, which is to find some internships, apprenticeships, something where I can get some actual hands-on in the field knowledge, training, experience, so forth, and kind of build myself up a bit. So
Right.
um, that's the plan. So we'll see how all that goes. But we're not here to talk about all those things. We are here to talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine and Inter Arma Enim Silent Legis, which is in times of war, the law falls
Yes.
silent.
Yes.
Interesting title to say the least. I did read a little bit of background on where they got the title from, and apparently our favorite showrunner here, Ron Moore, found it on a book title that was written by former Supreme Court Justice William Rehnquist. So
Ooh,
he used the title. He had more of it to say, but then he uses that line in the whole part of his title, which is apparently a book that was written about the suspension of habeas corpus during the either the Revolutionary War or the Civil War. I think it was the Civil War because he does make a reference to Abraham Lincoln. So I think it was the Civil War. Um,
okay.
I'll have to go back and check that particular note, unless they were referring to something else about Abraham Lincoln as well. But Rehnquist wrote a book about the suspension of habeas corpus, and he used this line as for kind of the reasoning behind it. And then there's more to that book, of course, that you can go and check out. But for our intents and purposes here, we are talking about it for this episode of Deep Space Nine. Now, did you want to give the recap
Yeah,
or did you want me to do it?
it's a pretty intricate plot, so let's say you give it a go.
I am fine with that. All right. So this episode starts off with Bashir in his quarters. He wakes up and well, actually it starts off with Kira and some of the other officers and Romulan senator.
Senator.
They are all in the conference room or the war room, and they're discussing basically how the war is progressing and the needs of the ships and stuff like that. Senator Kretak, who's played by Adrienne Barbeau, by the way, but we'll get to that later. She's basically like, yeah, you Federation types keep pushing back Romulan needs while you're servicing the Klingon ships and the Federation ships and so forth. Well, we need our needs met. She pushes to make sure that her ships are ahead of the line or move to the head of the line for repairs. Her and Worf get into it a little bit about, why Klingon ships need more repair than others. And, it's kind of a nothing of a conversation. To which then, when it's all over with, Kira's like, all right, we'll just, we'll get this done and then we'll move on. She says that, she wishes Kretak well because the senator is going back to Romulus for a conference, which then we see Bashir and Garrick. They're on the promenade, and we find out that Dr. Bashir is also going to said conference. He's going to be there to to give a lecture on some medical aspects that they want him
Tetracell
right.
White,
He's
the one of the viruses that he solved in the
yeah,
Gamma
that
Quadrant.
episode Blight.
Yeah.
He's going to talk about that particular disease, and he's been basically the de facto foremost leader on all things medically Dominion. So he goes to bed, wakes up, and Sloan from Section 31 is sitting in his room. And Sloan's like, yeah, Section 31 has a mission for you. And then, of course, not Cisco, but Bashir's like, yeah, I don't work for Section 31. He's like, yeah, too bad. Yes, you do. You work for us now. You're gonna do what we say. He tells him, we want you to go. You're kind of doing like a spy fact-finding mission. We're pretty sure that the Romulans are up to something, and we want you to figure it out. And he goes to Cisco. Bashir goes to Cisco afterwards, and he's like, "Yeah, try to track him down. There's no evidence that Sloan was ever here, but he definitely was, and we, need to try to capture him." But Cisco's like, "Look, we don't have anything on him. We need some more intel on Section 31. I want you to kind of play along and help us to track down what Sloan is up to, and of course, help us to get our hands on him." They agree, or not they agree, but Bashir agrees. I'm trying to get us to the better parts of this episode because a lot of this preamble stuff is
Yeah.
boring. Bashir agrees. He goes on to the USS Bellerophon, which is actually the USS Voyager, just redressed a little bit. So if you had never seen Voyager before, there it is. That's it. They just scraped off Voyager and put Bellerophon across the hull, but that's it. That's the ship.
Right.
Um, so now the Bellerophon is heading into Romulan space, and they're having a little meet and greet in the mess hall. This is where we see Admiral Ross, Senator Kretak, Bashir, and this curious little man comes up to him named Wendell. And Wendell's like, "Oh, I'm interested in phrasing entomology or whatever." And the doctor had just said, "Never say die" or something like that. And
Yeah.
Senator Kretek was like, "Where'd that come from?" And so Wendell uses this as a way to introduce himself and give this etymology of the phrase, to which Bashir is very shocked, because of course Wendell is slow. And he's like, "Wait a second, you sent me on this mission, but you're here yourself. What's up?" So then, Sloan pulls the doctor away. He talks to him. He's basically like, "Yeah, we feel like there's more to this than um, we originally let on. You've got a pad in your quarters. Go review." They meet up later on in Bashir's quarters, and Sloan is like introducing him via hologram of the who's who of Romulan power. He
Right.
shows him who's the former proconsul, who's now the praetor, which, for those of you who don't know, praetor for the Romulan society is like president, prime minister, so forth. So the leader
Top
of
dog.
the Romulan people, right? Then there's this other guy named Koval, who is kind of, his official ranking is more like a mid-level Tal Shiar operative, but Sloan basically intimates that there is more, way more to this guy than meets the eye, and that this guy is he's not just a mid-level something of the Tal Shiar. He is the Tal Shiar. And
Right.
so he's just like, he wants him to, really figure out what he's all about. The guy has a secret database that is kept off the books that he's sure has all kinds of information in it. And they want to try to get their hands on that if at all possible. They also know that Gaval is suffering from some kind of disease. It's called Tuvan syndrome, which is a neurological disease that mainly affects Vulcans, Romulans, and Rigelians. If you remember, of course, Vulcans and Romulans share a common ancestry. Even in this episode, they point out that there are a lot of similarities still between Vulcans and Romulans, even though there's been enough uh, time to cause a little bit of genetic drift that they're not precisely the same species anymore.
Right.
Now, Tuvan syndrome is not to be confused with Bandy syndrome, which a lot of people called out at different points, because Bandai syndrome is another thing that Vulcans get when they pass the age of 200. It's what ultimately kills Ambassador Sarek, um, which is when we saw him in the Next Generation episode, Sarek. He was suffering from the advanced stages of Bandy syndrome at that time. So, similar neurological diseases, but they affect the body differently. All right. So, basically, at this point, Sloan is like, "We're pretty confident that you, based upon your genetic engineering, should be able to look at him and determine if he's got this disease or not." This is exactly what Bashir ends up doing. He goes and he talks to him. He meets with Kaval, and he's just like, yeah, okay. After my assessment of him, I agree. He may be suffering from Tuvan syndrome. They now come up with a plan, or Sloan has a plan to basically induce Tuvan syndrome and to remove Caval from the player's table, basically. Now, this is going to effectively kill uh, Caval,
Right.
and this is where the doctor really kind of draws up short. He wasn't really looking to,
Assassinate anybody. Yeah.
step so deep into these plans. He decides he wants to try and consult with somebody to figure out what's going on, what his next move should be. He had been telling Admiral Ross a lot about what was going on, so he goes back to the Bellerophon to talk to Admiral Ross, only to find out Admiral Ross isn't available. He is taken ill suddenly. He's gotten poisoned or
He
something
has
like
an
that.
aneurysm all of a sudden. Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot that's what it was. So now he's out. So now, of course, this heightens Bashir's, suspicions. He doesn't know where to turn. Someone is clearly trying to isolate him and make him complicit in something. So he turns to the only other person he feels like he can have any kind of trust, and that is Senator Kretak, who we know from like all of this has really been on the side of the Federation. Like, even though she's got her reservations, she has been a bit more forthcoming. He goes to her, he tells her what he suspects, he tells her about Sloan, he tells her about Caval, and he's basically like, we've got to figure out what we can do to save this man's life. And I believe that we can get the evidence that we need if we can get access to his personal database. Now, she's very hesitant to do so because that's obviously treason, but he's like, hey, I need you to put aside 3 centuries of suspicion and help me to save this man's life. So this is enough ultimately to convince her to help him out. So now he needs to stall Sloan. So he goes to Sloan and he's like, on second thought, I don't think he had Tuvan syndrome. Now, Sloan is brought up short because he was ready to move forward with his plan in poisoning Caval. He's like, well, what would you need to be sure? He's like, get me, I got to be able to do a full body scan, something like that on him. Sloan's like, well, how about a tissue sample? So they agree to coat Bashir's hand with some kind of adhesive that will allow him, upon the next time shaking Caval's hand, to get the skin sample that he needs. Bashir goes to meet with Caval. He does get the handshake, but before he's able to make a clean getaway and go and analyze said skin sample, Caval asks to speak with him in private about some other medical matters. So he agrees. He goes into a room, and this is where the true interrogation begins. Caval reveals that he knows a whole bunch about Dr. Bashir and Section 31 and a bunch of stuff. And basically, they begin to torture the good doctor, hook up some things to his head, and start, beating him a little bit while they question him. Eventually, they're just like, well, he didn't really give us a whole lot. We don't really know why he's able to resist our mind probes, which we know it's because he's genetically engineered. So he's able to kind of resist these things a bit more than the average human would be. But they bring him in front of the Romulan committee, and they're basically like, even though our mind probes didn't totally work on him, we did get enough information out of him to corroborate the story of another Federation operative that we were able to use our mind probes on. And they bring that individual in, and it's none other than Sloan, who's been beaten up and so forth and so on. And basically Caval stands there very triumphant, and he says, this guy is, a full-fledged Federation operative. He was sent here to, undermine us, but also to get revenge because we killed his mentor in another engagement some other time. He's made all this very personal. Whether or not the doctor is totally in on this or just an idiot who is made complicit in Sloan's plans, we don't know. But Senator Kretak knowingly did all these things and,
Tried
committed treason and tried to
accessing
access our stuff and did all these things. Yeah, she's basically, they really just throw Kretak under the bus here. And they make it seem like Caval has been a patriot through and through the whole time.
right.
So now they're going to
Sloan. Yeah.
sentence
Sorry. Go
Kretak,
ahead.
yeah, sentence Kretak privately later. They are going to hold Sloan indefinitely for questioning, and they're going to send the doctor back to Deep Space Nine. Sloan breaks free, grabs a phaser, and before he can shoot anybody, Caval kills him.
Shoots him with his own phaser.
Yes. Back aboard the Bellerophon, Admiral Ross has returned to light duty. Again, Bashir is kind of like trying to sleep, gives up on sleep, goes to see the Admiral, and he's like, where's Sloan? And he's like, yeah, Sloan's dead, dude. You were right there. You watched it. He's like, one more time. Where's Sloan? And so now it's revealed that Admiral Ross is in on it the whole time. He and Sloan were working together, and basically they maneuvered the whole thing to kind of get Caval into a position to work with them. And I have to admit, like, that last part really kind of threw me, like,
Yeah.
why you would want to go with this demon
Well,
of a
so
character.
what the pitch was is Senator Kretak was in basically she and the other guy, who's the other guy's name, real quick?
Caval.
Kaval. She and Kaval were both up for the same position on that High Council. Normally, it goes to the Tal Shiar guy, but she's apparently been able to keep him off it. She wants it for herself. So by insinuating that Kretak had been a traitor by trying to get a hold of private files to get to Dr. Bashir. That's being a traitor, trying to get files to a Federation officer who may or may not have been part of a conspiracy for Section 31. She gets thrown under the bus, and the other guy is allowed to join the council. But it turns out he was working with Section 31, so they basically have a mole in the
There you go.
Romulan government. That's the idea.
And because he has come off now as this true patriot, he is
Right.
now unassailable to any other accusations which may come his way later on, because he's now got a proven track record of having been accused before and beat his accusers.
And if
So
and if he now pitches for the Federation and the Romulans working together post the war, that will maybe more likely happen, because even though Senator Kretak seemed to be friendly, uh, Admiral Ross thinks that she is a true patriot, and if she ever was going to be willing to betray the Federation, she would have. So they somehow trust the guy in charge of the Tal Shiar.
yeah, it
uh,
was a little
we can
convoluted
talk
to
about that
watch it.
plot for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. So this now Bashir ends up going back to the station. Once again, he is greeted in the middle of the night by Sloan, who thanks him for his help in getting all this arranged. And then, Sloan disappears once again. Um, Again, Bashir tries to make an attempt at capturing Sloan, but then thinks better of it and leaves Odo hanging, basically. And
Yeah.
that's pretty much the end of the episode. We don't really know what happens to Sloan after this. We're assuming he's on to his next bit of machinations, and we've got this weird kind of, I don't know what you would call it. It's not a solid end, I guess. It
Yeah.
leaves things open to have things, what could happen next. So
Right.
yeah, like I said, an unusual episode. It's not often that Star Trek kind of dives into these um, spy based episodes. A lot of what Star Trek likes to do is very cut and dry. These are the good guys, these are the bad guys. There are some moral ambiguities. This is the first time we've got so many people who are existing in this
Gray area.
shade of gray, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the
interesting.
the show, especially TNG, likes the idea of diplomacy. The diplomat who also has a massive starship behind him to defend himself.
Has the power but
Picard.
doesn't use it, right?
Yeah, Picard has he's the velvet glove over an iron fist, the Enterprise, and every now and then it's the velvet glove, other times it's the iron fist. But how would you use what? Which is definitely a great. That's why it's so much fun.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
And that's why those TNG episodes work so much, because as much as you want to believe it's the power of Picard's words that sway them, it's also the fact that there's a massive starship in orbit that could decimate the planet in no time. You
yeah.
know,
Prepare
um,
photon torpedoes. Yeah,
yeah, it exactly. He's offering a carrot, but you can see the giant stick shadowing him as he's walking around with said carrot. So yeah. So now, again, our first time viewer here of this episode, what did you think of this one?
yeah. So I do think the ending has some flaws, according to the plot. It gets so convoluted that even you, Perry, got a little lost there. I mean, I just
Yeah,
watched it, so I am literally
and
coming right
and,
off
it,
it.
and like I said, it's been a while since I've watched any of the season 7 episodes, especially as we're moving deeper into the season. I really, stopped because it was getting close to the end. I didn't like
Yeah,
that. So
yeah.
yeah,
So I want to say that this episode started in a place where I was like, "Oh, okay, this might be interesting. It's a spy episode." Um, but I have to say, Dr. Bashir, the whole time, he's annoying. His moral, this is the way things are. This is the way they should be. it's naive. Frankly, I get it. Star Trek is usually about the black and white, the good guys versus bad guys, as you just pointed out. But this is definitely supposed to be okay. What about the gray areas? And there's some compelling arguments for what we're doing. Straight up spying, like reconnaissance, as Sloan initially pitches it, makes sense. These are the Romulans. They have never played the game fair. They've never played it straight. They've never been up on the up and up. The episode on TNG where, of all people, Spock is on the Romulan homeworld trying to like build up some sort of like relationship, and like it turns out that like everyone they know in all the Romulans they know have been in on this plot to like
Yeah, from
trap.
the get-go to trap Spock, not a single one of them was ever on his side, believed in his
Yes,
mission,
right,
nothing. But even then, even with them not being on his side, they weren't on each other's side either. Each of
right,
them in turn was trying to figure out a way to scheme to get themselves ahead. The
exactly,
Romulans are inherently duplicitous even to themselves.
right.
It's it's crazy.
And then anyone who remembers the TNG episode, I don't know the name of it, but I'm sure you do, where there's an ambassador who we think is a Vulcan, and she like gets beamed, and then like the beam gets messed up, and we think she's dead, and then
I don't
I
remember
think
the name
it's
of the episode, but I do remember the episode.
is it
Actually,
O'Brien?
I believe it's Data's Day is the episode
I think that sounds right because I remember people
because
talking
O'Brien
about
gets married and Data is tasked with working with the supposed Romulan senator. She's asking him questions about the computer and the security and things like that. And yeah, Data's like kind of aware something is going on, but he's distracted by the wedding of the O'Briens and
right.
being first or best man and so forth. Yeah, so I think that's the episode.
Well, in that episode, this Vulcan ambassador, who we think she's been this ambassador for however long, and that she died in some sort of terrible transporter accident. Well, eventually the Enterprise goes and like chases after the Romulan ship that was there as a part. That was it. She was supposed to go. They were beaming her aboard the Romulan ship as a she's about to go be an ambassador, and
Mhm.
then oh, there's some sort of accident. She's not alive. She's dead. Then they realize that nope, something happened. So they chase it down, and it turns out that this was not a Vulcan. She was a Romulan the whole time. She was playing ambassador for years in the Federation, and now is returning home. So all of this to say is that if Dr. Bashir knew the history of the Romulans, which I would assume because he's supposed to be this super smart guy, that he would at least have some knowledge. I mean, not personal, not he himself interacting with Romulans. So we have to give him that naivete pass. But the whole time I'm watching this, I'm like, bro, Romulans are duplicitous to the ultimate. They have plans within plans within schemes within schemes. Like you can't trust a dang thing. So there's that moment where Bashir, we come out of commercial break, and Bashir is talking with Senator Kretak, and he's like, "There's a plot in your government." I'm like, "Homeboy, she's the one." Like I legitimately thought right then in that moment, like that he was so stupid that she was the one. I'm glad she wasn't, in the sense that the episode was ahead of me, so that they didn't actually. That would have been kind of an easy plot. Kretak had been. I mean, she was set up as the obvious person for. Turns out, we think we know her, but she's actually evil kind of plot line. So they moved ahead of me on that and said that Sloan and everyone else and Ross were all in on a bigger scheme.
Mhm.
So in some sense, I'm glad for that. But as you were recapping it, the ultimate conclusion then is that Section 31, Admiral Ross, and assumingly some part of the Federation thinks that they have better trust with the head of the Tal Shiar. Like
Yeah,
that homeboy is gonna be like
it's
scheming.
supposed to be. I feel like they were trying to give us a better the devil you know. Like we understand what the Tal Shiar is versus this. We've never heard of an optimistic Romulan before. A
Yeah,
hopeful Romulan. It's almost a contradiction in terms.
right.
So we don't know what to do with the Kretak, who seems to be. a patriot who's dedicated to peace and cooperation. We don't know what that is, but
Right.
we do know what a spy master is, and we can work with the spy master and trade with the spy master and do things like that. So they sacrificed her, and we're comfortable sacrificing her because, again, ultimately she's a patriot and this is what your country needed.
Right.
So you may not know it, but you still served your people by being our sacrificial lamb.
Right.
And the naivete of the doctor is what they use to sell it all, because
Right.
he's Mr. We've got to do what's right for the sake of rightedness. and
Right.
and and it's a common trope they use in Star Trek with the doctors in particular, where they are just these overwrought, overly emotional. We're here for the truth and for the justice and to save as many lives as we can. And to hell with your rules. I'm doing this because all lives are equally important in my eyes, and I'm not going to let you sacrifice a single one of them. They throw logic and reason completely out the window
They do.
whenever they can cloak it under this, but I'm saving lives.
Right.
Every other sense disappears,
Right.
and it's annoying. It's really annoying. But Dr. Crusher did it a lot. I got so tired of listening to Picard have to remind her that you're literally in a war zone. These people are killing each other,
Yeah.
and you might want to
Right.
save them, but by putting yourself in danger, you've now increased the danger for everyone else involved, all of our teams, because they can't
Right.
leave you.
Right.
So, just
Right.
wanting to be like, wake up, Doc, let's go. We can
Yeah.
come back later on.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of interesting because I can understand why doctors would be that way. Like, you deal in facts, you deal in high levels of knowledge. Normally, all you need to do to fix something is to know what you need to do and communicate it clearly. And it's black and white in that sense. There's not moral grays. It's how do I accomplish this
Yeah.
task, surgery, medicine. But that does not completely translate into
Yeah,
diplomacy,
into other
war.
areas of life,
Um,
it really doesn't. And that's
right,
one of the things about, like, I'm going to say about a lot of TV shows, not just sci-fi dramas, but a lot of TV shows I feel like they get wrong, because when they inject someone of a medical profession, or inject someone of a profession where their job is to save lives like that. And I want to phrase it that way because I see this also with people who are like firefighters, EMTs, police officers, so forth. When they get to break things down into I did this to save lives, all other rules go out the window. We're supposed to bow to this greater knowledge, greater calling this individual had, because what they were trying to do was attempting to save lives. But it's like, logistically, though, if you think about it, you put yourself and countless other people in danger by you trying to save those one or two or five lives, whatever it may be. And that is just unacceptable. You got lucky,
yeah.
but you shouldn't bank on that luck every time.
Yeah, it's that scene from Saving Private Ryan where uh, Vin Diesel's character steps out and tries to save the kid in the middle of the rain, but there's a sniper, um, and he gets killed because he was trying to save the kid. Man. Anyway, um, did I say that right? I didn't say that right.
Um, Saving Private
Hold on.
Ryan, where he tries to save the kid. I think
Yeah,
that's right.
I'm just trying to make sure I got the actor's name right because I'm saying it so
Vin
badly.
Diesel?
Vin Diesel. Why did I
I
say
don't know.
Van Diesel? Yeah, and I know I said it wrong. Vin Diesel. Duh.
We knew who you meant.
Anyway,
There's not a lot of
um,
diesels running around Hollywood, so we knew.
true enough. But yeah. Anyway, so yeah, this episode is really interesting. I like the Latin here. Inter arma enim silent legis. That again translates to in times of war, the law falls silent. There is a level of truth to that. The question is, like, do you just intentionally throw it all away, obviously, or what? So
And this is kind of, and it's interesting that this is the title that they used, because if you think about it and apply it to the episode, that really does sum up how Bashir and Admiral Ross's relationship evolves in this episode, because he
Right.
leans heavily on Ross to kind of be the pillar of Starfleet here, even to the point where the writers do it for us too. Like, remember in the mess hall when they're talking about when they're having their first sips of Romulan ale, and and Sloane coughs a lot because he'd never had it before, and they discuss the fact that he had never had it before, and he was like, "Well, it was banned in the Federation for a very long time," and Kretak is like, "Oh, come on, you mean to tell me you never?" Got your hands on a glass or two somewhere.
Some
And he's
illicit.
like, nope. I'm one of the few who, I followed the law. It was outlawed, so I didn't partake. So again, we're supposed to view Ross here as this very kind of paragonish um Starfleet officer who's made his way all the way to Admiral.
He's an
But
admiral.
I was gonna
We know
say,
he's
if
evil.
you know anything about Starfleet admirals, it's that they're all evil. Like, something happens to them, you're a captain and you're beyond reproach. You get that next level pip and you become evil bastard just like that. It's like we know you're a shady character from here on out.
It's like you have to kill the guy in private to
Yeah,
become an
right.
admiral.
You
Yeah,
gotta,
and Section 31 says, "All right, you've done what you needed to do. Here you go. Here's your
yeah.
pip."
And after that, it's just like a slippery slope to these people who used to be, so beloved and so forth. To now you're just like, you're shady. You're a skeezy character now. So, and again, all of our interactions with Ross up to this point had been mostly pleasant. He was very supportive of Captain Cisco. He recognized when Cisco, kind of knew things he didn't, and he backed off to let Cisco lead and do what he needed to do. He gave Cisco the support that he needed when he needed, personnel, ships, and whatever else. So again,
He let Cisco
yeah,
plan the retaking of
didn't
Deep
get in
Space
his way,
Nine,
didn't
and
call him off the front lines, didn't stop him when he was having visions from the prophets and everything else. He's like, really let him go for it.
yeah, he was like, you need to wrap that up
Yeah,
more than
right.
anything else. If I'm
This is
remembering,
this is important.
yeah,
This is something that we understand. I don't want to take you off this, so lock that down for now. Focus here, and then I'll let you
right,
do all that later. Is kind of the mood that you get
and
from Ross, which I can appreciate. You know, but yeah, I mean, now all of a sudden he betrays all that by getting in bed with Sloane and presumably Section
yeah,
31. We don't know how deep his ties to it
right.
are. And yeah, it's kind of
It's
disheartening.
Yeah, the last time we saw Ross it was with Senator Kretak. I think at the beginning of the season, right, where the Romulans want the moon around. How did that work? Why was Cisco not there? Cisco was on the Defiant somewhere. They
I
were.
believe that was when Cisco was cut off from the
Oh,
prophets,
he was
right?
still not
He
back to.
wasn't back yet, and so Kira
Yeah,
was in charge, and Kretak
right.
wanted to put
And she said,
the
"Out."
supplies on the Bajoran
Yeah,
moon.
go ahead.
And at first they were
Right,
agreeable until Kretak put military encampments and missiles and
the
stuff there,
missiles.
and they were like, "You got to remove those." And she was like, "Nah, we're not going to do that." And so then Kira and Odo and
Right,
some Bajoran ships were going to go there and blow them up. But then Cisco
right.
brought back the wormhole right before they started fighting, shooting each other. So yeah, that's what happened there.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, Admiral Ross, that whole episode was like, "Don't do it. You're not gonna do it. I know you're not gonna do it, Kira. We got to keep the Romulans happy." And then like is so happy. Like, what is? Oh, he backs Kira up. He says to
He
General
ultimately backs
Senator.
Kira, but for the most part, he stayed
Yes.
out of it. He didn't really.
Well, he was playing. He was kind of being whiny. He was being like, "Don't piss off the Romulans. We need them." But then he finally backed Kira at the last minute, and so Senator Kretak pulled back.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, just saying, like Admiral Ross has been
Yeah,
around.
like
We've
I'm
seen
saying,
him
he's
do
been here
stuff.
for a minute, like
When
really since I think he pops up in season 6, and then he's been the admiral on site whenever we needed an admiral. He's been the guy.
right,
We've had Admiral
right,
Nechayev. We had another admiral who came. Um, I forget what his name was. He was only there for like half an episode. So, and that was when Ben was first having the visions, and it was when the Federation was going to sign Bajor into the Federation for the first time. And Cisco was having those visions, and then he
Sure.
interrupted that signing ceremony and told them to stand alone. And that was in season 4 or 5,
5.
yeah. So, and that was the only other
Interesting.
admirals that we had seen, Nechayev, that guy, and then it's been Ross ever since. So,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And
go ahead.
I like that Ross. I mean, he's not evil like some of the others, like just a giant douche, just a giant jerk. In this one, it's interesting that he lets Bashir come in there and like this is an unofficial conversation. Take your badge off. Like, part of me wishes that he had ended that little tete-a-tete with some sort of like Dr. Bashir. I like basically Sloane says it to him in the next scene, but something like, I need to hear this voice. The reason I'm letting you say all this is because I know I need to hear it. That I can't let this become my way of doing things. So, but basically, Sloane says it in the next scene. Sloane says, "We need men like you who are principled, but you need men like me to protect you from a world that doesn't hold your values." Which is where I thought of the scene, of course, from A Few Good Men, of I stand on that wall. You need me on that wall. I expected him to say, "You can't handle the truth." It was kind of that moment. And seeing as how both that and this show are '90s, like it's like that scene must have been rattling around in their head maybe a little bit when they were writing that
I wouldn't be
dialogue here
surprised.
for
A lot of
Sloane at
these
the end.
guys were huge movie buffs, and um, yeah,
Aaron Sorkin,
yeah,
yeah,
and I'm sure that they just played off each other all the time, whether intentional or not.
yeah,
Um, Now,
yeah,
as much as I like that scene at the end where Sloane is basically like, you know, you're a great idealistic individual, doctor. You are exactly what the Federation is, supposed to be. But the Federation, as it's supposed to be, can't exist without people like me who are in the shadows, who, do the dirty work that your idealism needs to survive. That also is
right,
another common, very common trope that you see in a lot of sci-fi shows. Is there's this, and you know what, now that I think about it, just in this moment, it's not just even sci-fi shows that do it. Like a lot of your upper level political intrigue shows, that's kind of the vein. It's like, in order for the average
yes,
citizen to
oh
go about
yes,
their life and to enjoy, eating, their ham sandwich and drinking tea and driving, their vehicles on the free roads, they've got to put up
uh-huh.
with, this unknown uh beast that's out here, that's taking out,
Yes,
you know spy groups, and you know
yeah,
rounding up people to electroshock them and waterboard them, and like all that kind of stuff. And
yeah,
I don't like how common it's become, because seriously, there's just so many
sure.
shows that do that, and
Yeah, it's the type of show, the type of movie that wants to spoil the innocence of the
right. Like,
audience,
it's just like you
and
can't have a
yeah,
truly peaceful society, because for every peaceful person who's offering peace and trying to extend peace to others, it's kind of that Picard trope. You can be the bright, smiling
yeah,
face of the positive, progressive, peaceful future, but you're never going to get anywhere unless you've got a giant freaking tank willing to roll over your enemies that don't sign your peace treaty.
yeah,
Like, that's what it
right,
is. And I think that's
right,
one of the aspects of Star Trek that I don't want to say fails, but I'm going to say they haven't covered yet, because they don't it doesn't make sense yet how the Federation formed to be this kind of massive power that it is. Like, excuse me, how did you get all of these groups to want to cooperate with you in the first place? We know about the first, human and Vulcan pairing, sure, but
Right.
going beyond that and seeing other races and them wanting to work with us and everything else, we don't really get all of that. Now, the show Enterprise tries to address it, but even then, a lot of the conflict that we see in those new races when we meet them doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and it doesn't give us enough to see how we eventually got over it. And then they jump a lot of times just into war. So it's like, oh, well, how did you win this? Well, we beat them. We didn't talk them to death. We didn't make treaties that were favorable or unfavorable to both sides or whatever it is.
Mhm.
No, we tried, we failed, and so we used overwhelming force and technology. Now we all work together, and we've kind of worked backwards. We went so we it was conquer first, then we walked back and said, "See, if you had just signed this in the first place, you would have gotten all these rights and everything else, but now we wouldn't have had to bomb your cities or destroy half your fleet or whatever it is. We're still going to give you all that stuff, which doesn't make sense to people." So I wish they would do a better job of showing us the talking, the negotiating aspect, I guess. But I guess that'd be a boring show.
Yeah.
No one would really want to
Well,
watch that.
I like the idea that they basically do what they're doing to the Klingons. We're your allies, and yet maybe like 10 years down the line, what that means is a little bit fuzzy. In 20 years, 50 years, the Klingons and the Federation are just so intertwined, man. Like they're not really two different entities. And then 100 years down the line, it's just the Federation. The
Yeah.
Klingons are part of the Federation, but they're not the Klingon Empire. Or if they are, they still are a part of the Federation.
Well, yeah, they've so on the Klingons, I think they've done a pretty good job of exactly what you're talking about, just kind of muddying the lines. Because when you go back and you watch the show from the '60s, the Klingons and Starfleet and the Federation, bitter enemies. There was like a clear line of demarcation between the two of them. We were not going to ever gonna cross. But then, things, little things here and there caused little bits of cooperation and admiration of each other. And then in the movie, we see where a Klingon moon, Praxis, explodes, and it forces the Klingons to have to re-examine their borders because within a 50-year time span, their home planet is going to be a lifeless hulk. They've got to go somewhere else. And the only other people in the area that they can trust to help them out with that is the Federation, because they've got the Federation on one side, they've got the Romulans on the other side. And as much as they hate the Federation, they hate the Romulans even more.
Yeah,
And that's just a long standing blood feud that they've never really covered with any satisfaction as to why those two groups hate each other. It's that deep.
right.
They hate each other on sight. And even in this episode, we see where Worf is like, he's bristling at Senator Kretak. And as soon as she starts to talk, any kind of noise, he's ready to just shut her down. Well,
Yeah.
we're the ones, holding down the fort here, and you Romulans suck, basically.
Yeah.
You know,
It's a great argument they have actually, where
yeah,
she says, like we don't overcommit. Like he says we push through to when the fight comes, we push through, we take the damage to our ships. That's why we need more repairs. And she says that's just another word for reckless,
yeah,
which is exactly how these two people's work. The Romulans are gonna hope that someone else takes the brunt of the damage. Meanwhile, they can sneak in and take the win.
and that's what Klingons hate on an ideological level.
Yes,
Klingons are not cowardly. They don't do any sneaking and skulking about. They
yes,
confront you head on, and
right,
that's why they don't like the Romulans. The Romulans want to hold back and wait, and they may commit a small portion of their forces to gauge how you react. Then they come back at you in a totally different direction.
right.
All that kind of stuff. It's these feints and counter maneuvers that the Klingons never appreciated. And
Yeah,
that's also why they tend to like humans, because while humans will employ, spy tactics and do things and so forth, we will also come at you more from a head-on,
Yeah.
upfront standpoint.
You
We
can
will
bait
meet
us
strength.
into it. Yeah.
Right, you can meet strength with strength. You can get
Right.
a hothead captain just like you can get a more cooler-headed, logical individual as well. You can
Right.
and then our personnel, is all intermingled with that too. So
Right.
I think that that's ultimately why the Klingons end up liking humans because over time they see we've got more in common than not versus with the Romulans where it's like everything about these people is terrible. There's nothing about them that is
Yeah.
redeemable in our eyes. So yeah,
This quickly. I mean, I know we're kind of wrapping up here soon, but in the show, what is it? The one where they go to the future.
Discovery.
Discovery, and the Federation is supposed to have been kind of dismantled. Is there like some quick like explanation? Like my in my vision of the Federation, it's a blob that slowly sucks in even the Romulans eventually. Like the Romulans were
Mhm.
partners, but even like the Klingons, like now you're just a part of the big old Federation blob at some point. Is there something that's
Yeah.
just been like gone
So
wrong?
so in the distant future, just a mild spoiler for you, I don't know if you watch it. When Discovery makes its way to the 32nd century, the Federation does not really exist anymore. And the entire universe, quadrant, whatever, is severely fractured. Now, also in Discovery, we do see a major war between the Federation and the Klingon Empire, which does get settled, but then they jump to the future. And in the future, we don't really see Klingons at all for like yeah at all in that massive time jump that they do. By that time in the distant future, Romulus and Vulcan have reunited. The people have reunited. So the two planets, while they still exist as like ancestral homes, they now have a new planet they call home, which is called Navarre. So it's not Romulus, it's not Vulcan, it's Navarre. And the two
Mhm.
peoples share it. Um, what else did you ask?
Basically, like if the Federation doesn't exist, was there some turn like there's some
Yeah, so
catastrophic?
there's a
Was it
catastrophic thing, they call it the burn, and
okay?
so basically, um, when the crew comes to the future, everybody is scattered, and it's like it'll take you hundreds of years to get back to wherever your home base is. Dilithium is extremely, extremely rare, and
Mm,
that's because of the burn. There was this moment where all of the dilithium in the known universe, as far as anybody could tell, basically blew up in an instant. And no one really knew why. No one really knew what happened. And so all the ships and aliens that relied on warp technology and dilithium crystals to power their warp drives suddenly were without any because it all blew up. And
mm,
then trying to find dilithium was exceedingly hard to do. And then when you did find it, it was often so remote that getting out there to it was feasibly impossible. And so
mhm,
then you had to rely on what was it was a courier service, and there were a few it was just like a few people who had ships that weren't powered up at the time of the burn, had a few
mm,
dilithium crystals that didn't explode, and were therefore able to travel these distances to get to and from the dilithium. But they couldn't bring massive amounts of it anywhere. So there was this huge black market that existed for this stuff, which gave rise to black market groups like the Orion Syndicate and so forth. Whereas other enforcement groups like Starfleet and the Federation had to pull back, protect what borders they could, and were trying to do research into new forms of propulsion and so forth because there was no dilithium. So
gotcha.
it was an interesting premise on how to like show a very fractured future, and then you had our crew trying to help rebuild the Federation that they remembered,
Hmm.
but also while doing that, they had to investigate the burn and why the burn happened. And when they got to that part, unfortunately, the story sucks. Uh, the reason for the burn is stupid. Is all I can say. Like it wasn't good. It wasn't good.
So,
Um,
quick question: was it bad because it was a plot bad or a character bad? Like they didn't
I'm gonna say
do.
both. It's both. the basically the reason that the burn happened is because there was a group of scientists who found this planet that had a unique alignment of dilithium crystals, and they were investigating that unique alignment of dilithium crystals when one of the scientists' child was exposed to this random convergence of dilithium radiation which altered their physiology and therefore made them connected to not just the dilithium of this place, but to
But
all dilithium everywhere. And
yeah,
then
the
because they,
gamma alpha quadrant or something.
yeah. And so then, because they were a child and overly emotional, their emotional state would cause fluctuations in the dilithium. And at one point, when said parent dies, the child becomes so overwrought with emotion that there's this literal explosion, which causes all dilithium everywhere to blow up.
Yeah, that's dumb.
Yeah, exactly. And so then our crew has to go to the planet and get to the, whatever and figure out what's going on. They realize that the child is still alive, and the child just so happens to be a member of one of the species of people that's on our hero ship here, which had its own connotations because they were like so far in the future, didn't know they would exist, blah, 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 that kind of thing. Then they have to make this weird father son connection to get the kid to calm down so they could do enough investigation to sever their connection to all dilithium to make dilithium safe again. And then that caused like the best character to leave the show because he went back to his home planet to raise said little child as his own.
Gotcha.
So not not good. It wasn't good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
So
well. Gotcha.
anyway, to this episode here. What are your final thoughts? What did you think of this one overall, and how do you feel the title tied into the episode?
Yeah, inter arma inem silent legis. It's funny how Latin, I guess Latin includes a lot of like in times of war the law falls silent. That's 8 words, whereas in the title here only uses 5. So things like in and of and the um those
Are filler words from the development of English. 'Cause I looked it up actually, and apparently this phrase, these words can be arranged in any order and mean the same thing. Because apparently in ancient Latin, word order, sentence structure didn't really exist.
interesting.
So you could really just say this in any kind of way and it would work.
I gotta imagine it's something like silent legis, the law falls silent. Like that needs to be together with like inter arma in him. But sure, let's go with that. Don't know anything about Latin, so I'll take it for what it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that also it needs a certain order in order to to make sense, but that's what the thing said is that apparently it doesn't. You can almost say it in any format and it'll work. It'll mean the same thing.
Gotcha.
So it kind of reminds me of that Darmok and Jalad episode with Picard. You got to just know the subject matter nomenclature in order to get it
Right.
to make it make sense.
Gotcha. Wait. What I was say is that I like that idea. I like. I've always liked stories that are willing to go into the gray area. That's what makes stories fun. Stories where black and white is black and white. They can be fun. Don't get me wrong, but they can be a little bit boring. A lot of the fun things about storytelling is what do you do with this gray area of morality.
Hmm.
So this episode definitely goes there. I thought so. Dr. Bashir has always come off as a kind of naive character in the sense that he's
Hmm.
a optimistic doctor type, as we talked about earlier. With I think the revelation that he's supposed to be some sort of super genius is unfortunately a mistake because it means that like if you're supposed to be a super genius, like he and those other 4 super geniuses were supposed to have plotted out the full future history of the Dominion War, and that it was pointless to resist because all possibilities led to the Dominion winning. Which now that that's been proven wrong, it just seems silly to have even proposed it. But like do I believe that they could have predicted it or not? Like, let's assume they could predict at least tomorrow. I don't know. So, like,
Mhm.
Bashir comes off as a bit naive. It's weird because he goes to Cisco and says, Sloan just showed up and tried to make me go do something, and like he says to Cisco, like, yeah, he thinks that like I'm just begging to go follow in his footsteps, but it's Cisco who tells him, yeah, go do it. It's like Admiral Ross who says, yeah, like we're working with him. Like let me put it this way, Doctor Bashir is supposed to be smarter than he is. I guess he's intellectually smart, but just not
I think this is
morally or
also I think this is also one of those situations where they don't know what to do with the thing they created. And they've done this a few times in Trek. Wesley Crusher comes to mind as another one, and it does typically fall to this: we created a super genius, and now we have no direction.
yeah,
Because there's this opinion that seems to bear out a lot of these things with the super genius trope, which is you'll never be able to slip anything past them. They are so incredibly smart and perceptive that direct logic, whatever, misdirections don't work on them. You've got to get them in some other way. And
right,
then they also have them suffer by having all these other deficiencies. Like Wesley Crusher was an out and out genius, but he was also a child. And he
right,
was trying to use his genius intellect while dealing with the experiences of growing up. So, of course, he didn't have all the answers. And that's also what made him annoying because he was smart, and yes, he knew a lot of things, but he couldn't employ that knowledge to the same degree of expertise, I guess, that say Data could. You know, then you have Dr. Bashir, who again supposed to be a genius. He's artificially, enhanced here, and he takes um uh, it's the genius that then he takes and applies to everything else, which he then ruins with this extreme naivete. You can't be that naive and also that brilliant that you
right,
see all these issues and are trying to affect these massive changes. And that's
right,
why the other arguments also fail because they were doing things while also geniuses themselves, but they were doing things under the influence of Bashir,
right,
who his whole bent was we want to save lives,
right,
which is why their projections failed. He was skewing the data.
right. Okay, okay, okay. That makes sense. I guess what I'm just getting at in follow up to what you said about like Wesley Crusher is like I is he tempted by Section 31 or not? Because if Cisco had to convince him to do it, then he's not. Or at least
I
he has enough
I
self
mean,
control that he wouldn't
well,
have given
that's
into it.
Well, that's kind of the point that Sloan makes. He says to him, you want to act like you're not interested, but you are interested. You like a puzzle, you like a challenge, you want to figure stuff out, you know. And now I took him going to Cisco and talking about it, not as him being like, I need to be convinced to do this thing,
Right,
but for him to be able to stand up and say he at least initially followed protocol. He was chomping at the bit to do the job. He wanted to know about it. But by going to Cisco and talking to Cisco, he gets the permission he needs to take off and dive in.
well, maybe it's just that I don't fully buy um Dr. Bashir's actor. Hold on. I know I'm terrible.
Alexander Sadiq.
Yeah, I know this is terrible. We're in season 7. I should know that. Maybe Alexander Siddig is not playing this in a way that made me feel like
Well,
Bashir was so like I don't know. It's
I will give you credit for noticing that because it is kind of well known that they didn't really know what to do with Bashir's character after a point. And so, and I mean, and he's talked about it. There comes a point where they really just didn't really have a feel or a direction for him. And there was even talk of writing him out of the show a few times because they just didn't know what to do with the Doctor. And then when they did the whole somebody being replaced by a changeling and they used Dr. Bashir for that, remember?
Yep.
That was going to be his exit, but they decided at the last minute to not do that.
Right.
And then that's when we got into this whole genetic engineering thing. And, they kind of gave a little bit of new life to the Doctor, but
Right.
also allowed
I
them
can
to
see why that would
introduce
be
new
done.
characters like Jack and Serena and so forth.
Okay,
So
yeah, that makes sense why they would have done that then for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
I guess I don't want to put too much on Alexander Siddig because it's not like this is his plot. He's having to do it as they write it for him. I guess there's just I don't know. There's always this part of me that like, how would I have written the story? How would I have tried to like fix it? And maybe that's just not fair at times, where it's like this is the story they gave me, and this is the character as he was written, and so maybe I just need to let it go because it's not like I have. Again, there was a moment when he goes to the senator and Cretok, whatever, and says like, "Oh, this is the plot," and I was like, "Homeboy is so freaking stupid. He's telling the person who's in on the plot." Like I thought she was the person, and I had to stop the show for a minute and be like, "This guy's an idiot." That's where I was,
Mhm.
and then the episode obviously does not go that direction. It gets very complicated, but it still felt like Bashir was just so naive to have let himself be manipulated so clearly. But again, that's what the point of the episode was. That's what Sloan says at the end. Is like, I know you were I knew I could manipulate you for my own purposes, but like he says to Bashir, like, I am honored to be in your presence. So it's like the episode is trying to defy me by like knowing what my complaints would be and like jumping ahead of it. So I guess I have to say the episode's great then because they honestly are. I guess I'm realizing that they were a step ahead of me the whole time. I still think the plot still kind of ends weird with the idea that again the guy and head of the Tal Shiar is actually their mole, but maybe
Mhm.
he is the ultimate mole because he would be wouldn't a spy master have his contacts and be the spider at the center of the web? So yeah, maybe it makes total sense actually. Um, I don't know. It's just one of those episodes. This is fun that we do this show together. We talk about stuff because like a couple episodes ago, I was like, oh, I'm realizing how much better this episode is now that we're talking about it. Speaking of which, I wanted to quickly mention. So the name Bellerophon is the name of the knight that apparently is the
Rode Pegasus
hero,
the first time.
but goes up against Chimera, which is the name from 2 episodes ago when Odo met another changeling. So you can see that they probably had that on their mind. But part of the reason that's interesting, let me pull this up. I want to make sure I'm not going crazy. Uh, Mission Impossible 2 has the okay, it came out in 2000, so maybe I was thinking a little ahead of myself. I was wondering if they had seen Mission Impossible 2 because that's part of the plot. There's a virus called Chimera and a vaccine called Bellerophon that is part of the plot of Mission Impossible
Oh,
2. You might remember that from trying to watch it recently and be like, "Oh my god,
yeah.
this movie sucks."
Yeah, no, it's that's one of those that no matter how many times I've tried, it still does not stick to memory. It just
Yeah,
wasn't good at all.
yeah.
So
So anyway, I just remember when I heard Bellerophon when they were talking about the name of the ship, the back of my brain like clinked, like I know that name from somewhere, and then realized what it was. And Chimera was also 2 episodes ago, that kind of thing.
yeah.
So small little detail. Speaking of which, I guess I never followed up with you. Have you been able to keep up with Mission Impossible movies? I know you had kind of watched at least one or two
No,
of them.
I have not. I watched 1 and 2 and 3, stopped, and it was really because I watched 1, took a break, then I watched 2 and 3, and I did that because 2 was so bad, I was trying to get that one
Yeah,
done
get
so I could
over
get
it.
to
Yeah,
3, but then it was like, I guess I overloaded myself in watching them that way, so then it was like, "Okay, I gotta, like, back off here."
detox. Yeah,
Yeah, and then I started doing all this other stuff too, so it's like, okay, at
yeah.
least, I'm over the hump to a degree, and I
It's
could
funny.
go
One,
and
two,
watch
and
these others.
three are kind of like their own little trilogy in a sense. Because 4, 5, and 6 definitely I feel kick it up a notch, and are great. Like I like 1 and 3. Don't get me wrong; they're kind of classics. But I think Mission Impossible, as we know it today, is 4, 5, and 6. As most people would probably be like, "Oh, that's Mission Impossible," because he does all the crazier stunts in those
Yeah,
movies.
trying to one up himself until
Yeah,
he either breaks something or kills himself. Um, I mean, at
yeah.
this point, what I mean, there's nothing else he could really do. Death
I,
on screen
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, come watch Tom Cruise literally kill himself, do whatever, however many stunts he can do until he kills himself.
until he dies. That's what this movie's gonna be. He's gonna
Yeah.
jump out of a tornado, out of a helicopter into a tornado to be vomited out of the mouth of a shark onto the tallest building in the world and impale himself and
Yeah.
die. And that's it. That's the mission.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, I haven't seen all of them. I'm working my way through it. I've watched some other things on, Amazon and everything else, trying to, I don't know, just find different things to be into. So we'll see. We'll see. I'll get back to it. I'll get back to them.
Ah,
Right now, I'm enjoying the comic book for real, though. That's been a lot of fun. So.
great. Fantastic. And the Expanse, still good on the Expanse, still moving forward there?
Yes. Oh, I was gonna actually message you the other day, so we'll just use these last few minutes here as a quick little catch up. I am really enjoying this part of the book. I just hit chapter 30, and the last few chapters have really been a deep dive on. Uh, I've been calling it like the behind the scenes of the proto molecule.
Mm.
So it's just like giving you a lot of how things existed before
Ooh.
and how interconnected things are. And they've given us a new twist to the ring gates and what they could
Oh.
potentially be about. And I've just
Oh.
really been enjoying a lot of that, and the descriptions are great. In fact, like I said, I was going to message you because I was like, I think that the reason they cut this show off is because there's no way they could have translated this scene
Into
to
some sort of
screen
visual.
and done
Okay.
it well. Like I don't see it. I don't see it. And when you get there, you'll agree with me. I think that you'll get there and you'll be
Sure.
like, yeah, there's no way. Like
Yeah.
even trying to imagine it and even trying to like I was trying to imagine it and trying to use the show as a frame of reference because in the episode where they go to Illis and
Hmm.
they end up and Holden goes like underground and um Elvie is with him, and they have that robotic form of Miller
Uh-huh.
trying to help them out and everything. Like I was even trying to use that as a frame of reference in my head, but the way in which the scene itself, as it's described, has taken even that and expanded upon it. I was like, I don't think it'll work.
Hmm.
I don't see how. Not without a super heavy dose of CGI, which it
Break
would
the
take
bank.
you out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would take you out.
Yeah.
So
I can imagine that might have been it. Well, I mean, seeing as how the books have a giant time jump, we'll just have to hope that Jeff Bezos, now that he's married his girlfriend slash whatever her name is, he can
well, she's
finally,
his wife now. No
yeah, they
girlfriend,
can,
she's his wife.
yep, they can save up some millions of dollars for season
Save
7.
up. Save up. Really?
Come on,
I mean,
that's the
they
joke. That's the
yeah,
that's
they at this point, it's I mean, at this point they could have filmed the whole thing twice and still not have run out of the money that he needed for his wedding. Like what is it? Did he pay some $50 million for the wedding? So
I
they said there's
I
no way
tried
that
I've
he
tried
couldn't.
to ignore it, but yes, I heard that number. Yeah.
No, I heard the number and it was because of what's that politician's name? Elizabeth Warren. She was screaming about how if he can pay 50 million for a wedding, he can pay more in taxes. And I was like, he's not wrong. Like, I don't even need to know the rest of what's going on here, but 50 million just for a wedding, like, come on. Um, I did see there were some protests about his wedding. People in Italy made various effigies of him and his new bride, and some were burned, some were drowned, some were hanged. And they were just kind of like all over. Apparently, people were protesting not so much um, Bezos, but I guess whatever area of town it is that he bought and closed down for a while,
Oh,
like
really? I
it's
didn't
like
hear
it
that
was,
part. Oh
yeah, it
man.
was like a major thoroughfare, whatever. No one was allowed in. So you had all these people who were like their daily routines and whatever else were upended for him, and they were not appreciative.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, I can imagine. I mean, I don't know how long they did it. I don't know how long he brought the place out, but I mean, just imagine that, it's you know, you got to go to work,
Yeah.
and the main way that you go to work is closed off, and then it's closed off for days, not hours,
Oh, was it days?
days.
Man.
Yeah. I yeah,
It's
I'd be
annoying when
pissed
on
off
a
too.
Sunday the marathons
Yeah.
go. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
Sunday and the marathons are going. Yeah.
And yeah, and that's the thing. It wasn't anything like special. It wasn't a, miraculous birth or a election something or whatever. Just
Or an
some rich dude,
assassination. Like
right?
we had to
Or
get
the
some guy in the
major death,
hospital. Yeah.
right? Something like, yeah. It was just
A head of
some
state
dude's
is
right,
he's barely hanging on. Get him to ER stat. Nope,
right.
nope. He's
No, just
just
some rich dude from another country, a
yeah,
whole other
another
country,
country. Yeah.
has closed down your
Yeah.
main thoroughfare. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's some angering stuff right there.
Yeah.
So
Maybe
now,
that's the thing about being rich is like being able. I mean, literally, it's what they call it, right? Fu money. Like that's what it is. It's all about I can say
yeah,
fu.
yeah. I don't care. Like, what are you gonna do about it? Like, I just paid your country's GDP for my wedding, so you can be upset all you want to, but you know, but yeah. So that's the only thing I really know about the wedding. I don't know anything else. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either.
I can't tell you her name either. To be honest, I don't know who went. I don't know who didn't go. I don't,
The
and I just know
biggest
that Elizabeth. I want to call her Leslie Warren. I don't know why. Um,
Elizabeth one.
but
Leslie
I know
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth. I know Elizabeth Warren was quite upset with him for the taxes part of it
Right.
than anything else. So
The funniest joke I've heard about his now wife, Jeff Bezos' now wife. I'm sure you remember hearing maybe about a month ago that she and a bunch of other female celebrities went up in his little spacecraft for a couple of
mhm.
minutes. I heard that that was like the most expensive trip to get away from his, significant other that's ever been paid. Like, he just wanted 10 minutes of silence. That was the most ever any man has ever spent to get 10 minutes of silence.
Jeez, jeez.
uh,
He's like, yeah. What do we call them now? Are they astronauts? It's like, did they even make it to space? Weren't they just in the upper atmosphere?
apparently, astronauts is specifically NASA because in Russia you're a cosmonaut, NASA you're an astronaut, but that means it's like it's kind of up in the air. If you're not like a NASA sent person, what are you? I mean, astronaut. I guess if you're American, maybe that's just gonna be the broad term. Who
Would
cares?
they be a
But
terranaut? Would that be the phrase then?
I don't know.
Because you're not affiliated with any space organization.
Yeah,
Are you? I
and
guess
you're
they'd be
from
a
Earth. Yeah,
yeah, and you're from Earth. You could
yeah,
be a Terra or a Bezos not since it's his company. And yeah,
yeah.
Amazon doesn't work. That sounds like something else. So, hmm,
Well, you know the jokes they've made about the shape of his ship, so
yeah. And I've made the and all the women who went and all that.
yeah. Katy Perry, baby. She didn't even look out the window. She looked at the camera the whole freaking time. Look at me. I'm in space. I brought a flower. I
Well,
brought a.
yeah,
She brought like a dandelion or
a
something.
single flower. That was
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. I mean, come on. Can you think like if you could go to space, if you had a trip, you could float. You'd be there for 10 minutes. That's it. Would you be looking at the camera or would you be looking at the freaking window the whole freaking time? Like, I can see that thing way out there. I'm floating. I'd be throwing
What
balls
if
back and forth.
wouldn't it be funny if like the reason that she looked at the camera was because she was afraid of heights? So she couldn't that's why she couldn't look out the window.
That would be hilarious.
I think that would just absolutely be hilarious. Why'd you stare at the camera the whole time? I'm afraid of heights. Mm, all right. That'll do it.
Oh,
So,
gosh.
man, I wonder who said the joke, when they got up high enough. I can see my house from here. Like, I wanna know who did it. I know someone did. I know someone did. So, well, all right, I think that's gonna do it for us on this episode. Tune in next week when we should be getting more into actual Dominion stuff. That should be fun. A nice return to that, of course.
Remember?
No, yes. No new Trek updates. Everything is pretty much the same. July 17th is the release date for season 3 of Strange New World. So stay tuned for all that. And until next time, guys, take care of yourselves.